I'm going to show you the model that I used to turn my big idea, likes and cash, into $1 million a year business. I'm Jake Molina. I draw big ideas from people and then I help them turn that into $1 million a year business like I did with mine. So the idea is likes and cash. And I am very heavy on ideas. It is one of I think, the most valuable thing I can give somebody and that has been given to me is the ability to spot these ideas and draw them from people. Because I think about how things are going to change in social media, coaching, consulting, mentorship, whatever you sell, right? You help people accomplish something else. And the keyword is like people, right? So you do it via social media. And I think about what will change. So where are we headed in the future? Like if we saw in 5 years in the future, what's going to happen? There's probably going to be a lot of AI. There's probably going to be a lot of bots, a lot of clones, a lot of volume, and you can see it nowadays. So a lot of things are going to change. And when I make decisions for my own business personally, I don't like thinking about things that are going to change because I'm not going to pretend I know more than the OpenAI engineers and I understand what's happening with the AI stuff, and I won't try. Instead, I'd rather build a business upon what is not going to change, what is always here, what is always like permanent. And I think if AI is the most powerful tool of the 21st century, I believe that ideas are the most powerful tool in history. And we still talk about ideas nowadays. We still like have these things embedded in our culture that have been around for thousands of years. So, an example. I was in Florence, Italy recently. Beautiful town. And I noticed how these ideas that were so big back then are still big today. So the idea of Michelangelo and David, we associate it with artistry, with mastery. We talk about Marcus Aurelius and we associate that idea with stoicism and strength. We talk about, well, every dude knows about the Roman Empire, right? And we associate the Roman Empire with greatness and grandeur and just amazing things. And these ideas have always been around. And even in marketing, we still talk about at least the ideas of M&Ms, for example, right? Like melts in your mouth, not in your hands. Or a Rolls Royce at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise from this Rolls Royce comes from the electric clock. And so these ideas, they're always permanent. And AI is not, well, it's going to replace people and coaches, it's going to put a lot of people out of business, but not ideas. So when I think about how do I want to set up my business, my account, my quote unquote personal brand, is let me just set it on things that won't change, like ideas. And me personally, I've run multiple businesses and I've messed up multiple businesses, but I got one thing right, which was the likes and cash idea, which is, well, likes and cash. It's you'd rather build a business around making money and running a business than a show business, right? Building an audience intentionally from an audience that can pay you instead of indiscriminately and just spray and pray. Hopefully, somebody is going to transact with you. I don't believe in that. I believe in building with intention. So, the idea itself, likes and cash, has served me well in every business I've done. So, I did software, which we sold that software. Then I did coaching and consulting the regular way, like with calls, sales calls, teams, DMs, whole shtick. And it got to 100K months, arguably very high in costs, but it still worked. Then I switched to now I sell with Google Docs, right? And well, it's still based on the likes and cash idea. So the success translated, and now I'm doing something else with more of low ticket, more volume based stuff. But these businesses, they weren't like great. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff were like stuff that people could figure out on their own. But the idea behind it was solid. And that's why they worked back to back to back to back. Because even though the business, I just kind of used other pieces and other models that I got from other people, the idea, the underlying solid foundation was there. So if you want to get one idea right, one thing right, it's got to be the idea. Because if you get the idea right, then you can get other things less right. Like, I don't, well, if you see my stuff, I have a lot of typos. I copy and paste a lot of stuff from one social media to another. I don't really put a lot of effort into the, I call them the small boy problems, but I did put a lot of effort into finding that one big idea that allowed all the other decisions to be easy. So one decision, so you can not have to make 1,000 decisions. So I'm gonna walk you through the model on how I turned this one idea, likes in cash, into $1 million a year business, and net $3 million. So I'm gonna show you in steps. So we go by one step, 3 steps, and I'm gonna go over each one more in depth. We start with finding the big idea, because if you find that, then the rest comes easy or easier. Second is turning the big idea into 1 million. And third, turning it into $1 million a year. Because it's one thing to get there, it's another to sustain it and actually have something that recurs. Even though you don't want recurrent revenue, you want something else, but I'll show you why I make that distinction over here. Let's start with the big idea. So the big idea is kind of the center of everything. If you get one thing right, you want to make it that. Because in order to get people to buy, you first need them to buy into. If somebody, for example, you buy into Apple's Think Different, right? This is for the misfits. Then it's much easier to buy a Mac, right? Because you buy into the philosophy, you buy into the idea of it. If you buy into the idea, I think Corona, like the beer, their sales multiplied multiple times during the lockdown. Why? Because the word was in everybody's head. In order to get people to buy, you first need them to buy into. And this is why I don't treat like my social media personally like an offer salesperson. I treat it like an idea salesperson. The first step in my funnel is not an offer. My first step in my funnel is an idea, because I want to get them to get into that. And the power of it just kind of multiplies if you get that thing right. An example here is this person. So this person closed a client. How did it happen? So this person was an investor, and he used to work at like this investor board, and then he left, and now he shows other people how to raise money. Now, when we talked, I wanted to get into like what makes him specific, what makes him different, what makes it impressive. And often you will find that you also have those things. It's just that sometimes you've been inside of your work for so long that you forget how impressive it looks from the outside. And you may need somebody to draw your ideas from you. That's why I say I don't really run a done with you operation. I don't run a done for you thing. What I do is I run a drawn from you thing. I take people's mumbo jumbo experiences and competence, and I draw their big ideas from them, because, well, frankly, I'm a terrible coach. Like, I don't follow up with people. I don't hold people accountable or touch base, because I just find that my most successful clients never needed it. For me, the best thing I can do for them is what I did for myself, which is I didn't make $1 million being a coach. I made $3 million off of one idea that I took all the way. So the best thing I can give people is draw their idea from them. So when I talked to this person, turns out he didn't see how impressive this thing was, because he used to work at this board, and to him it was like a normal thing. But talking to him, I realized, you realize what you did. Let me put it into other words. You used to be an investor, and then you stopped, and you went rogue. You went rogue, and then you showed other people how to get money from investors, because you're showing them how it works from the inside. You realize that you shouldn't be selling this just as I help you raise money like everybody else is doing. You have a big idea here. You're the rogue investor, the investor that went rogue and shows you how things work as an insider. When he put that in his bio, when he put that like everywhere and made it a core part of his message, one of my favorite stories was one time he messaged a guy to connect, and the guy's like, "Hey man, I read your bio. I get it. I'm into this. Let's talk." And so when you get the idea right, you can get other things less right. Yes, obviously there were better ways to get a client, but if you get that right, then you may not need to, because the ideas are the most powerful tool in history. We keep talking about these from millennia. So if you find one that's yours, it's more flammable than you. It will outlive you, and it will do the sales for you, because it will get people to buy into it, instead of you having to sell people into it. So, anyway, that's just one example. Another one that might be relevant was from somebody else called Tobias. So, Tobias is an AI expert. Really good fellow, Tobias Swingman, Swingman, if you want to say it in the German accent. But the guy shows people, one of his products is showing companies that have ugly data, like messed up databases and SMS that they're doing nothing with, and show them how to find money within it. And it's really hard to talk data and analytics in a way that doesn't make people want to go to sleep. So it's hard to stand out in that like data analysis space. So we coined a term called ugly data. People call it like databases. Ugly data just has some semantics that makes it look like, oh, okay, I get it. So sometimes you can call an idea that, and sometimes like his, you can put it visually. So he doesn't have to say, I'm gonna take your ugly data, put it somewhere, and you're gonna get some leads from it. It's much more powerful to put your idea into a visual or a demonstration. So this is an example of his. He says, you got ugly data. I got a prompt. And what this prompt does is, if you put your ugly data into it, then the prompt will show you where the profitable opportunities are, because it's going to parse it, it's going to do everything for you. But you don't have to do anything. You just have to copy and paste your ugly data into this prompt, and this is what it does. It finds the profitable opportunities for you. So like these examples of big ideas are what gets the business going. You don't need to be an expert in funnels or offers. You just have to get the idea right. So where did I put this? Yeah. So one example of this can snowball into different and very profitable ventures. And the business part isn't the hard part. It's the big idea part that's tough. So for example, he said, earlier this year, I set a goal for myself. I want to help 100 people and profit. 6 months in, the numbers, he's fully booked in corporate consulting, got 58 private consulting clients, which it's a business that didn't exist before. And now he's partnering up with the big boys like LinkedIn Learning and O'Reilly. Because, and I believe this because I've seen it with myself and others, one big idea takes you to 1 million. And if you want to get one thing right in your business, it's got to be the idea, because that is the one thing that will not change in effectiveness. Business models will come and go. Things are going to die, but the ideas, they are forever. Just ask Michelangelo and David and Marcus Aurelius. So, first step is finding the big idea. Once you do that, what do you put in it to take it to 1 million? So I'm going to show you the one that I personally use. For this, you have 5 stages that you may take people with through. So these are kind of the same for everybody. So it's, you take people from becoming strangers, they don't know you, to followers, they have some relationship with you, to leads, to then customers, which is different, to clients. I'm going to make the distinction and why it matters when I get to that part. But let's start with stranger to followers. How do you build an audience that you can monetize with the big idea? And the key thing here is, when you want to turn from stranger to followers, you want to not sell the stuff, but sell the idea. Again, because in order to get people to buy, you first need them to buy into. So we gotta sell the idea first, because that is the most flammable, sticky, persuasive, best thing that you can get the first people into. So how do we do this? I do this with something that I call whale bait. Whale bait is the art and the practice of talking to people exclusively who have 3 components: the money to pay you, the attitude to work with you, and the problem that you solve. If somebody has the problem that you solve and the money to pay you, they're wealthy, but they don't have the attitude, that doesn't classify as a whale. And I do this because I've known what the other side looks like when you sell an idea or when you build an audience just with fish bait. I've got two quote unquote bigger audiences, Twitter and, well, X and Instagram. Instagram is 15 times smaller than X. And like that's the difference between a toy car and an actual car in size. Yet these two, they make me the same amount of money at the end. Why? Because I built Instagram with fish bait, Instagram with whale bait, and Twitter with fish bait. And I've seen these horror stories of people with 400,000 followers that can't crack $4,000 months. People with 100,000 followers that can't get more than one or two clients per month. So what's happening? Why is this happening? It's because they build their audience on fish bait, which is just attracting the masses. But the truth is, most people cannot pay you and shouldn't pay you just because, well, like we're not McDonald's, you know what I mean? We don't sell water to people. Like we sell luxury goods in terms of coaching, consulting, help. Coaching and consulting is a luxury good. So why are we attracting everybody who wants it? It doesn't make sense. But if you build an audience with whale bait intentionally, getting the people who, well, can pay you, have the problem that you solve, and have the attitude to work with you, then this is how you end up with audiences that are massively profitable and massively efficient. Here's an example of this. Somebody who said, hey, thanks, mainly getting a lot of people who have cash flow, insane, God bless, I don't know how to do that many sales calls where the content can sell my offers. When you're good at brand, when you're good at content, when you're good at whale bait, you can afford to not be that good at sales. And in order to get good at whale bait, you need to be able to sell the idea more than just top 10 lists of people to follow, top 10 books to read. It doesn't attract the people that you want. Therefore, it shouldn't get posted. Because that's my philosophy in Likes and Cash. I'm here to build a business, not a show business. To keep it brief, you sell the idea with whale bait. Now, you got a following. How do you turn that into actual leads? And here is when I introduce the concept of value versus insight. Value versus insight is the art of you selling the person behind the idea. So if you look up how do you build an audience, what's kind of the common advice? What's the mantra? It's give away your stuff for free, right? And then some people are going to see value in it and pay you to implement it. I don't believe in that. The reason being is that I have found, well, you probably have too, that people don't really make decisions out of gratitude. They make decisions out of self-interest. And if we analyze what giving your stuff away for free does is it satisfies their self-interest, but it doesn't satisfy yours. Why? Because if you give the stuff away for free, then your incentive is for them to pay you for it, but their incentive is just getting value, like yours and mine and everybody's. So if you give away the stuff for free, then why pay you if they already have it? Like, what's the reason for it, right? All things equal, and you can take this one to the bank, people would rather pay less. So value, which is the art of, well, giving away all your value, then it attracts triers. Whereas insight, which is not giving away the answer, but demonstrating that you have it, demonstrating that you're the person who came up with the idea and why it works, then that attracts buyers. You don't want an audience of triers. And by triers, I mean the usual prospectees language that people use, which is, let me try your stuff for free and then I'll get back to you and pay you to implement the paid thing. And it's almost like these people have indigestion, right? Because they go with, let me digest this content. It's so much to digest. Let me digest it. And then once I'm ready, I'll reach out for sure. A lot of people don't. Like, very few people do. Most people won't, right? Because they have indigestion. Value gives people indigestion. Whereas insight, it's not telling them what to do. So for example, you know how to do a thing, right? this came through experience. You learn an insight. This is a lesson that's really like core to you. Because you know that lesson, you have multiple ways to deploy it, right? For example, because you know that you gotta train to failure, you know how to squat, bench, and deadlift. Now, if you tell people just how to do one thing, then you divert their attention to do that one thing instead of diverting the attention to where you want it to go, which is you. You are the source of this idea. Then we shouldn't be selling the tactic. We shouldn't be giving away the value. We should be showing them the insight of, hey, there's a source to where these things come from, which is you. So this is why I don't give away my stuff for free. I give people insight into how I can help and where do these ideas come from. And that has been honestly a massive difference between, again, an audience that makes me 50 times as much as the other one. Which, like, again, for reference with the cars, imagine if a toy car and a Ferrari, you put them to race and the toy car beats the Ferrari or is just as fast as the Ferrari. That's the difference between audiences. It's a massive difference. It's not 15%. I'm wrong the math, but it's either no, it's 1,500%. It's 15 times. It's hard to fathom how much of a difference building an audience with value versus insight can create. So yeah, you wanna use well-bait to sell the idea that you already developed, and then you use value versus insight to sell the person behind the idea. Now, the goal then becomes turning leads into customers. Now, this is when we gotta make the distinction. What is a customer and what is a client? And why do we want to create this? A customer is somebody who pays you once. A client is somebody who pays you in a recurring basis. So, why are these important? It's because I have found that people make decisions to buy client programs for arrangements, kind of like a snowboarder chooses which slope to go down into. They take their time to decide, sometimes way too long, because they know that if they choose the wrong one, there's big consequences. So we can make them feel better with nurturing. For example, I don't believe in lead nurturing, but you can nurture a lead and say, this is fine, people in your situation have done this, like, trust me, bro, don't worry about it, right? And usually it requires sales calls because you can do a lot of context management on a sales call, but I don't like sales calls. And so you ask the person to like trust you and be like, yeah, don't worry about it. But they don't want to do that, right? Because they know that if they choose the wrong slope, there's something really bad that could happen. And so what I've found is that if I sell them a small thing first, then I speed up the lead much more, because it's almost like giving them a trial of this slope. And I'm like, see, this is what it's like. And then I found that when people get a taste of what it's like, they're much more likely to go and keep doing the thing. And I gotta define taste here with the Google study. There was a Google study saying that you need like 7 hours of content consumption in order to create a purchase, something like that, or they gotta see your stuff 7 times, something like that. And that's thought it was pretty solid, like, frankly. But there's a distinction to be made. You don't want 7 hours of attention. You want 7 hours of consumption. So what's the difference? Attention is when you play a podcast and then you go and, I don't know, cook or do something else during your walk. You don't really pay attention to what's going on. Consumption is when you actually like consume what's happening. And what is a way to get people to consume your stuff more seriously is you gotta charge for it. So for me personally, out of my clients, 80% of my clients have bought a small thing from me before. Just a cheap little thing that allowed them to see, okay, this is what the slope is like. This is why maybe if you run sales calls, you have this thing where it's kind of harder to book a call than to close people on a call. Like once you get them on the call, it's easy. It's getting them on the call that's tough. So this is when I introduce you to the concept of prospect inertia. So prospect inertia, what is that? We have leads. and then we have clients. When you just sell them a big time thing, prospect inertia doesn't have a chance to activate. And prospect inertia says the more money someone gives you, the more money they are likely to give you. So if somebody gave you zero, asking them to give you $1, $2, $3,000 a month, it's a big jump. But you can create some sort of inertia instead of asking people to marry you, maybe go on a date with you, and then they're much more likely to go into the next step. And we create inertia with creating customers that are cheap. And the difference in value between customers and leads, in myself, I've run the numbers, it's 56 times. That is the difference between the size of a human, you, and a blue whale, which is the biggest mammal on Earth. It is a massive difference. Why are these so much more valuable? It's because when you want to get clients, which is the goal at the end, you are asking people to jump. But when you create customers, and we take the stuff sitting in your Google Drive and then turn that into small offers so that people can test the slope with you, you ask people to flow, which is a much more natural approach than just asking people to pay you the big stuff right away. This is a big component of why I can close people with Google Docs. I don't need sales calls to sell, because not only does the whalebait provide context by selling the idea, Valid versus Insight sells the person behind the idea, and then by you providing these customer offers, what you're really selling is sell the smallest step towards the idea. And it's such a much more natural transition than trying to force people on the DMs or on calls to buy, because you're just meeting them where they're at. They don't know your idea, then you introduce them to them. They don't know the person behind it, well then you introduce yourself. They don't want to commit to the biggest thing, but they're interested, well then you sell them the smallest step, and so on and so on. And we ask people to flow around your idea-based business much more easily by creating strangers to followers with whalebait, leads to customers with Valid versus Insight, actually followers to leads with Valid versus Insight, and leads to customers with what I call the customer funnel. It's taking the stuff you already have sitting over somewhere and then turning that into your best funnel that actually gets you leads that are 56 times better. At least that's my experience for me. And lastly is turning customers to clients. And this is where the final step is, which is transformation with your idea. And this is when we gotta be careful, because you don't want to build a client business. Ask me how I know. That's huge in costs. Like I had a team that had $58,000 a month in costs, or that you just don't like. You want to build a business that allows you to like stay in your creative ideation phase, because you are in a creative profession. You are a mental athlete. Your mental state is literally your business state. So we got to keep it sharp, right? So what have I found is not a way that keeps me sharp when I'm making client offers. That is for me what I call, well, I don't call it, that's just what it's called, the offer suite. So what's an offer suite? An offer suite is when you have multiple offers, right? So people have like a course, a program, a community, and a mastermind, right? So that is designed to create efficiency. But I found that it creates inefficiency, because let's say you improve your course. Let's say you make it better. So this one, you took the time and it's really cool. But you improve your course, but that doesn't mean that your mastermind gets better, or that your coaching gets better, or that your community gets better. It's just that the PDF that you used to get people got better. So what was supposed to be 4 times as efficient is actually 1/4 as efficient. What I've found is that instead of having to sell my stuff with an offer suite like this, I sell my stuff with an offer shell that doesn't monetize my stuff going on. It monetizes access to me. So how does this work? In my world, everybody who pays me $1 and above gets the same material, the same stuff. I don't like classify stuff like this is for these people and this is for that people, this level or that level. Everybody gets the same thing. So everybody gets access to this stuff. What I sell on top of that is actually just access to me. And I limit it at every level and price adjusts accordingly. So an example of how this manifests is the other day I ran a workshop. A few people showed up. Now, I was selling to people who only bought that stuff. Some people were there who just paid a ticket to attend that one. But in that same call, there were also people who pay for closer access to me. Still limited, but they were there. And then there were people who pay more access to me. And then I also had over there people who pay for one-on-one access to me. And so on and so on. So look at what happened there. Like, it's important that you pay attention to the details here. Just by doing one thing, the stuff, I could serve everyone and help everybody there. So that is true efficiency. It's when you do one thing and that one thing translates into many things. So if you structure your offers in an offer shell instead of an offer suite, then you can put in one thing, get out many. And then you sell access on top to the people that you actually want to serve. And so on, and so on, and so on. So this is why I like doing stuff with my offer suite. And what you're really selling with yours here, again, it's a transformation with your idea. Because they already bought into it, they already bought something related to it. Now you gotta get them to step into it, to move on to the next stage. And hopefully you understand kind of like how important this thing is for you. Because look at what we're doing here. We are first selling the idea. Second, we're selling the person behind the idea. Third, we're selling the smallest step towards the idea. And fourth, we're selling a transformation with your idea. So it's all your idea. Like, this is what makes this work. If we don't have that, then the whole thing is slowed down. You throw a wrench in the whole thing. And this is why it's so important that you get your big idea right in the beginning. And big ideas, you could think they're big, but if the market disagrees, then they're not big, right? So there's got to be some sort of alignment with it. And to me, this is the map that I used to get to $1 million. Now, just because you make $1 million doesn't mean you're at $1 million a year. Because there's a really interesting phenomenon that happens here. And by interesting, I mean painful, is that monthly recurring revenue reverts to the half often. So we're here, by the way, so you don't get lost. Monthly recurring revenue reverts to the half. So if you want to make $20,000 a month, you first need to get to 40 because monthly recurring revenue will half. If you want to get to 50, you first need to get to 100 and so on and so on. This happens a lot because of the idea of alive wallets and dead wallets. So an alive wallet is somebody in your audience who's willing to pay you and like they're in the market, right? A dead wallet is somebody who's not. Every single wallet, just like every single person, will die. Even your best clients, maybe they'll do something else, they'll rebrand, or maybe they'll just retire, or maybe they'll just die, right? So every single wallet is going to die at some point, which means that all recurring revenue will get to zero at some point. Remember when I told you that you don't really want recurring revenue? What you really want is not recurring revenue, but something that stands. Again, like we want to build a business on stuff that is always there. You want to build not upon recurring revenue, but upon LTV. And LTV is, I define it as the practice of extracting as much as you can from alive wallets before they die. Because every single wallet dies. And if we're looking at it from a mathematical perspective, then your goal is to extract as much from it before that happens. Now, there's many ways to do this. MRR is just one of the ways we get LTV, which is lifetime value. MRR is just one of the ways it manifests. But when you get to the million, you're pretty well known, you're established. That is the exact time when you gotta make that shift and allow more people to give you money in different ways. So let me show you how that looks. So this is $1 million a year. We already make the distinction between customers and clients. Now I'm going to make a separate distinction between low ticket and high ticket. So let's say you're at this point, you made $1 million, you're doing well. Let's say you're like this gym, right? You're at this gym and currently you've been selling two kinds of offers. You've been selling low ticket stuff, so maybe like a drink, something from the vending machine, right? And you've been selling high ticket stuff to clients who stay, so a membership. The key to unlocking the $1 million a year is doing something on the two ends that you haven't. So if you're a gym, for example, I'll give an example of my wife. So my wife, she runs a lot and she trains at the gym occasionally. Now, for the gym, I am this person. I am a member. Now, she, every now and then, she buys a one-time pass to get inside of that gym. Because it doesn't really make sense for her to be on the membership. But that pass is expensive. I've done the math. Over a year, she will pay around what you would pay for like 6 months of training there. It's like, it's not cheap, right? But still, it's expensive. It's valuable for the gym to offer that kind of, I call it an experience. Like for example, let's say you're traveling and you want to show up to a gym. Like it doesn't really make sense to sell you a membership, but maybe you'll pay 3 times what they usually charge for one day just because you're just going to be there for that day, right? So selling that experience matters. But what do people do? They're very like stiff. They're very rigid. They're like, no. You can only buy this price at this level because I only work with people who are committed. Well then, dude, like you miss out on all these people's wives that want to train and still give you a lot of money, but you don't offer that experience, and that lack of flexibility hurts. When you focus only on MRR, then you miss out on the LTV of these wives, and you shouldn't, right? Because it's just going to be a one-time thing. It's a customer that's high ticket, so it serves you to get that, right? And maybe there's clients that pay for less access here. And what does that do? It allows you to create recurring revenue for your gym without really having to serve a lot and do a lot of stuff. Maybe they don't need a coach or whatever. They just show up like once a month, but to them that is enough, right? So that is less access at low ticket, and it still builds up recurring revenue. Now, the key to unlocking the $1 million a year for me was to understand not to be rigid. And to understand that every audience, it's not just like an amorphous thing. Like your audience doesn't look like this. Your audience looks much more like this. It's split people at different segments. And if you only sell a client offer, then you're gonna only get a corner of it. But if you understand how to deploy different kinds of ways to extract LTV from people, then you're going to be able to monetize much bigger segments of the audience. And you're not going to have the horror stories of a huge audience that just can't monetize. Because you understand that the goal was never MRR. The goal was LTV. And once you have an establishment and you're already there with your gym, then what you can do is you can play the LTV game. And this is what sustains the $1 million a year. It's not recurring revenue per se. Only this are recurring revenue. But you need 2 pieces. You need recurring revenue, and you also need revenue that recurs. Because you can't really predict this, but it still happens in your business. And not having that is one of the mistakes that I wish I corrected. I corrected it now, so I know. But it's one of the biggest things that keeps people away from getting that recurring revenue or revenue that recurs, is they're too rigid. And if you introduce several ways to get access to the idea, that's where the magic is. Because that's when you can get paid from all places. Now, this was the big model. But again, It only starts from here, from the big idea. This is the unlocker. I like to think of finding your one big idea as finding a color that doesn't exist but is highly desirable. Once you find that color, everybody wants it. And then because it's flammable, it's big, and people like it, then what you have to do is install a model that's already been working, that's already been proven, and then you take your one big idea and you paint the entire thing with it. You just paint it. All you're doing is painting the house from a color that nobody else can see, nobody else has seen before. Because if they want to be part of the idea, if they want to take part of it and have the full transformation or even just a piece of it, they have to pay you. If they want to get some sort of experience, they're already bought into the idea of what kind of gym you're in, however you want to define it in your big idea. They have to train there in order to adopt it. So that's when you truly create the niche of one, the monopoly, when nobody can solve the problem in the way that you solve it. And this is why the main thing I do with people is I draw their big ideas from them. Again, I don't run a done for you or a done with you. I run a drawn from you business. I take people's stuff and I'm like, what is the big idea we can take here? And then we turn that idea into $1 million and then $1 million a year using the tools that I used here. But it matters that you have your idea. Or like you don't need to have it, but you need to have some sort of competence that we can do something with. So I don't really do sales calls. So what we can do is we can start a conversation, see where you're at. If there's some potential so that I can draw your big idea from you and then help you turn it into $1 million and $1 million a year, well then I'm happy to have it and I'm looking forward to connecting.